My husband suggested we go on a relaxing spa trip, which was supposed to be a fun getaway just for the two of us. However, he ended up inviting our son and his wife along, even though I don't get along well with her. He didn't even ask me beforehand. When we arrived at the hotel, my daughter-in-law said to me, "If you hate us that much, you can just sleep in the parking lot or something." Both she and my son kept making fun of me, and my husband did nothing to stop them. I finally lost my patience and said, "Fine, I'll sleep outside tonight, goodbye." Then I walked out to the hotel parking lot and sat in our rental car. After a while, I decided to go for a nighttime drive to clear my head. I enjoyed driving through the city until dawn. Suddenly, I heard the loud sirens of ambulances and fire trucks. I had turned off my phone to avoid more arguments, so I turned it back on and saw a ton of missed calls from my husband and son. When I called them back, they were nearly hysterical, shouting and crying, "Where are you? What are you doing? We've been calling and texting you so many times." It turned out their indoor smoking had caused a big fire at the hotel. Even after all that, neither of them apologized to me. I was completely disgusted, so I asked my husband, "Hey, who's more important to you, me or Eric and his wife?" He replied, "What? Why are you asking that now? This isn't the time to talk about that." I said, "No, I get it now. It's clear to me that Eric and his wife mean more to you. You don't care about me at all anymore." Both my husband and son went silent, shocked by what I said. Then I began to reveal a secret we had kept from our son until that moment. "My name is Lucy. I'm 46 years old. My husband Ben and I have been married for 20 years. We both work at the same toy manufacturing company. We have a son, Eric, who recently married his college girlfriend, Amy. To everyone else, we seem like a normal, happy family, but things aren't as perfect as they seem." One evening, after I got home from work, I was cooking dinner when I noticed my husband, Ben, in his office doing some research on the computer. "Ben, what are you up to in there?" I asked, curious about what he was doing. I peeked into the office and saw that Ben was looking at a travel agency website. He turned around and said, "I was just thinking that it's about time we made some travel plans." "A trip? That sounds great," I exclaimed, feeling excited. "You know, we're both always working, so we don't get many chances for a nice vacation. I really want to get out there and relax once in a while, don't you?" "Yes, I absolutely do," he agreed. "I've been thinking the same thing." Thankfully, we were heading into our company's off-season, so it was easy for both of us to take some time off. Just the thought of the trip made me so excited. When we first got married, my husband was helpful around the house, but over time, he stopped doing chores altogether, saying he was too tired after work. That left me doing most of the housework on top of my job, which was exhausting. This trip sounded like the perfect way for me to relax and unwind. But most of all, I was thrilled that my husband, who usually seemed focused only on himself and his work, and barely talked to me some days, actually wanted to go on a vacation together. "I've already started planning the trip, and it's going great," he said. "But there's something I'm not sure I should even tell you." "Something you shouldn't tell me?" "Well, now I really want to know." "What is it?" I asked. "You probably already know where this is going, don't you?" "It's about Eric and Amy," he said. When he mentioned our son and his wife, my smile instantly faded. "Yes, that's right," he continued. "My son Eric has seemed to dislike me ever since he was in junior high. He mostly ignores me when I talk to him, and on the rare occasion that he does respond, he just says things like, 'It's nothing, Mom,' or 'Don't talk to me.' Sometimes he would even say, 'Get back to cooking,' or 'Just give me my allowance.' In the worst cases, he would lock the front door and put a chain on it so I couldn't get inside. At first, I thought it was just a phase, the kind of rebellious stage every kid goes through. But when his terrible behavior continued for several years, I started to worry and talked to my husband about it several times. However, Ben always gave me the same answer. "That's just part of being a teenager, isn't it? You were a kid once too, so you should understand." He never tried to discipline Eric, no matter how much his behavior hurt me. I really tried to understand, but no matter how many times I confronted Eric, his attitude and behavior never seemed to change. When Eric married Amy, I wasn't invited to the wedding, and I never got any kind of thank you after I sent a letter to congratulate them. Eventually, Eric brought Amy to our house to introduce her to us. From the moment I met her, I knew we wouldn't get along. She had brightly dyed hair, pierced ears, flashy makeup, and bold clothes. Amy acted politely in front of my husband and Eric, but as soon as we were alone, she dropped the act. She sat there glaring at me and said, "No wonder Eric hates you." With those harsh words and her hateful expression, I realized she was a perfect match for Eric. As you might guess, they didn't have any children and seemed to live their lives freely. Even though Amy hated me just as much as Eric did, they still came to our house pretty often. Every time they visited, they did nothing but hang around and say hurtful things to me. They often stayed until dinner, and I would end up doing all the cooking and cleaning by myself. During dinner, Eric would always demand more drinks and snacks, no matter how much food was already on the table. It hurt my feelings and made me uncomfortable. I rarely joined in their conversations, but one day, Amy spoke to me as if I were stupid. She asked, "Why you still work even though you're married?" Amy doesn't work because she insists that Eric should provide for her, but it seems like she has a habit of slacking off and wouldn't last long even if she did get a job. I sighed as she happily talked about skipping work at her old part-time job. Unable to stand their selfish and arrogant behavior anymore, I asked my husband for advice again. He just said, "Eric is still growing out of his rebellious phase, and maybe he's a bit troubled, but surely Amy isn't so bad, right? Amy treats me like a housekeeper, just like Eric does. I have a job too, and it's exhausting for me." But my husband just said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do anything about that." He could have helped if he wanted to, but it was clear he was trying to avoid the conversation. Eventually, Eric and Amy stopped coming over. I don't know why exactly. Maybe they just didn't want to see me anymore. Or maybe they felt financially stable enough not to need free dinners several nights a month. All I knew was that they weren't coming over anymore, and I didn't have to deal with their arrogant behavior. However, Ben still met up with them pretty often. Sometimes Ben would come home and I could instantly smell Amy's perfume and the cigarettes she and Eric smoked together. I have asthma, and secondhand smoke could be dangerous for me, so I always begged Eric and Amy not to smoke in the house when they came over. Even though I wished things could be different between Eric and me, it was complicated. I felt a sense of peace from not having to see him and his wife anymore. Above all else, I just couldn't bear their abuse any longer. Because of this, I tried my best to convince my husband not to bring Eric and Amy along on our vacation. Ben finally relented, and I was beyond relieved. We decided on Miami as the destination for our trip. I looked at the guidebook every day, bought new clothes, and waited impatiently for the day to arrive. However, I had no idea what unwelcome surprise awaited me. On the first day of our spa trip, suitcases in tow, we arrived at the airport to leave for Miami. As we made our way to the gate, my husband suddenly stopped, turned around behind me, and said, "There you are, you two. Hi, Lucy." I turned around at the familiar voice, and to my surprise, Eric and Amy were standing there. "What? Why are you here?" I asked in shock. "Didn't Dad tell you? We decided to tag along with you guys to Miami," Eric replied. I froze in astonishment and glared at my husband. I heard that Eric and Amy were also hoping to plan a trip to Miami, so I asked them to join us. "Don't be mad. I'll make sure everyone's on their best behavior," Ben said, trying to smooth things over. Ben knew how horribly they treated me, yet he still chose to put their wishes above mine. I had worked so hard for this day. I put in extra effort at my job and even went on a diet, and now all of it was ruined. I just wanted to give up and go home. There was no use going to Miami if I was just going to be miserable the whole time. As I was about to turn around and go back the way I came, Eric and Amy stopped me. "Mom, I've wanted to fix our relationship for the past 11 years, but I just didn't know how to be honest about my feelings. That's why I always acted the way I did. I also understand that I haven't always treated you fairly, but I couldn't change my attitude with the two of you always fighting, which made it hard to come over and spend time with you. You know what I mean? We don't want to complicate our relationship with you any further," Eric said. I was astonished. Eric had never spoken to me like this before. It was an awkward situation because turning around and leaving would have made me look like the villain, so I had no choice but to agree with the arrangement and go to Miami as a family. Eric and Amy were in high spirits on the plane and ordered several drinks. My husband sat next to me, smiling ear to ear the entire plane ride. I, on the other hand, still felt something strange in my heart but decided to drown it out by looking out the window and watching the clouds go by. After arriving in Miami and renting a car, our trip began with an itinerary my husband came up with on the plane. Soon after, however, Eric and Amy began talking only to my husband, completely ignoring my presence. They also harassed me at tourist spots, making me fall into a puddle and getting me all wet, and forcing leftover food on me at lunch. In the midst of this disquieting atmosphere, after dinner at the hotel, Eric and Amy came to our room for drinks. My husband went downstairs to grab some snacks from the hotel shop, and Eric and Amy came and sat on my bed without asking. Then Eric pulled out a lighter and a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. "Hey, stop it. This is a non-smoking room," I said. "What's the big deal, Mom? The smoke will get vented out. It's not a problem," Eric replied dismissively. I rolled my eyes and stopped him from lighting the cigarette. Then I noticed Amy had also pulled out a cigarette of her own, and that was the last straw. I couldn't hold back my frustration anymore and started yelling at them. That's enough. This is a non-smoking room. If you don't follow the rules, we're going to get kicked out. Why are you getting so mad about everything? Eric snapped back. You know I have asthma, and you also know smoking isn't allowed here. Even if you don't care about your own mother's health, you have to follow the hotel rules, I shouted. Oh, Mom, you're way too serious. This side of you has annoyed me for so long, Eric said, rolling his eyes. Smoking in a non-smoking room is ridiculous. You need to calm down. What's wrong with enjoying ourselves a little on a trip? If you hate us so much, just sleep in the parking lot or something, Amy added. Her comment left me speechless. While I was trying to collect myself, my husband walked back in. Hey, I could hear you yelling all the way down the hall. What's going on? Why are you so upset? He asked. I can't do it anymore. I can't be around these two anymore, I cried out. Lucy, what's wrong? He asked, concerned. They're trying to light their cigarettes even though they know this is a non-smoking room. I begged you so many times not to invite them, and now look at what's happening. It's unbelievable, I said, tears welling up as all the feelings I had been holding in overflowed. Eric and Amy just looked at me with smug smiles. You're so annoying, Mom. You act like you're better than us. You won't even take a sip of alcohol. You're not even trying to get along with us, Eric said condescendingly. I finally felt something inside me snap. Fine, have it your way. I'll sleep outside tonight. Goodbye, I said, my voice steady but cold. My husband looked shocked as I quickly gathered my valuables and phone, ready to leave. He panicked and tried to grab my arm to stop me, but I shook him off. Shut up. Don't follow me. Just leave me alone, I snapped, storming out of the room. With hurried steps, I left the hotel and headed for the parking lot. I noticed there was no sign of my husband following me. Once I reached the car, I got in and started driving around Miami, trying to clear my head. I had a bad feeling about this vacation from the moment I reluctantly agreed to let Eric and Amy join us. Now it was clear that their feelings towards me hadn't changed at all, and neither had my husband's. Even though I tried so hard to persuade him not to, he still invited Eric and Amy without my consent. After what had just happened, I knew it would be difficult, if not impossible, to maintain any kind of relationship with the two of them. And then there was the secret about Ben and Eric that I was desperately trying to keep to myself. The more I thought about everything, the angrier and sadder I became. I kept driving, hoping the beautiful night view of Miami Beach would help calm me down. Eventually, I did start to feel a bit calmer, but I was exhausted from driving for so long. I decided to park the rental car in a beach parking lot and take a rest. As I settled in, I thought I heard sirens in the distance, but I was too tired to care. I quickly fell asleep, letting the exhaustion take over. When I woke up the next morning, I was greeted by the beautifully glistening ocean, illuminated by the rising sun. I decided to have breakfast at a nearby restaurant by the sea. But as I sat there, enjoying the meal, reality came crashing back. I took out my smartphone, which I had turned off when I left because I didn't want to hear my family's antagonizing voices or even read their texts. Feeling calmer, I decided to check my phone to see what my husband and the others were up to. I turned it back on and saw that I had received a huge number of calls and texts, about 30 or 40 since 11 p.m. last night. Right away, my phone rang with a call from my husband. Honey, where are you? What are you doing? Do you have any idea how many times I tried to call and text you? Ben said, sounding both upset and tearful. What do you mean? I'm just having breakfast at a beach restaurant, I replied. Seriously? You're out enjoying breakfast while we're in a crisis. Eric's voice was filled with anger. What crisis? I asked. Eric explained, we had a little party last night with cigarettes, wine, and snacks. We all fell asleep, and when we woke up, the room was filled with smoke. Was there a fire? I asked. Yeah, it was a small fire, but it set off alarms. The fire trucks came, and everyone in the hotel had to be evacuated. We're being blamed for it. Amy got burned a bit and had to go to the hospital, and now Eric and I have to go to the police station to explain and apologize to the hotel staff. So that's what the sirens were about last night, I said. My husband tried to explain more, but it was hard to understand because he and Eric were almost in hysterics. They wanted me to go to the hospital and stay with Amy until they could get there. Without a single apology to me, my husband put his son's wife first, just like always. I was sure he'd never change, so I gave him one last chance and asked, which is more important to you, me or Eric and his wife? What? Now is not the time for that, he replied. Well, that's all I needed to hear. Goodbye, I said. I was deeply disappointed that my husband had thrown away his last chance with me. Don't say goodbye. This isn't the time to act like this, he protested. No, I understand perfectly now. Eric is your priority, not me. You don't care about me at all anymore, I said. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Ben and Eric were shocked. Taking a deep breath, I started to reveal the secret my husband and I had kept from our son. Eric, you're actually the child of your father and his lover. Eric was horrified, and Ben was even more flustered. I began to explain everything. Ben had an affair with a woman from his workplace many years ago. She was his subordinate, and by the time I found out, she was already pregnant. The woman, who later begged me not to charge Ben for alimony or ruin his reputation, wanted to give me the child. Despite my anger and distress, I felt sorry for the baby and decided to take the child in, even though the affair had hurt me deeply. I didn't ask for alimony from Ben, but the affair eventually became public. The woman lost her job, and while Ben's involvement was also exposed, he got less negative attention because he was raising the child. I chose to raise the child as my own, even though we weren't related by blood. Eric, the child from the affair, started acting out in junior high, and his behavior only worsened over the years. Even though I knew he was the child of another woman, I struggled to find the right moment to tell him. I was attached to him and his father and had raised him with love. When I finally told Eric the truth, he was shocked and angry. How is this possible? I'm the child of another woman? He yelled. I told him, I have proof if you want to see it. I keep it with me because I know your father would destroy it if I left it at home. Eric couldn't believe it. So you're saying you're not really my mother? I've tried to be a real mother to you, but it's been difficult, I said. Our problems might stem from the fact that your biological mother is the woman your father cheated with. Eric fell silent, unable to respond. My husband then yelled at me, you promised never to tell him. Promises don't matter between us anymore, I replied. Just be thankful I put up with you for 24 years. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked my husband, Eric, and Amy. I decided to finish my Miami trip on my own, never returning to the hotel or hospital. I went home, packed my things, and moved back to my parents' house. I prepared the divorce papers and sent them to my husband. Later, a colleague updated me on what happened to the people I once considered family. I found out from a colleague that the police had scolded Ben, Eric, and Amy for smoking in a non-smoking room. The hotel also demanded a hefty compensation from them for causing damage and disturbances. To pay the fine, they had to come up with a large sum of money on their own. My parents hired a lawyer to help with the situation, and Ben and I quickly finalized our divorce. News of our separation spread through our workplace, and Ben, whose performance had declined, ended up resigning quietly. He struggled to find a new job, borrowed money from various people, and eventually went broke. Eric's income and mental health also suffered. He and Amy argued constantly and were unhappy in their marriage due to their worsening financial situation. As for me, I found solace in the beauty of the beach and now visit Miami several times a year with my parents and friends. My work life has improved significantly, and my efforts are being recognized more than ever. Without Ben around to overshadow my achievements, I've been promoted to manager of the accounting department.